Your cold email is not ignored because buyers hate outreach or resent every unknown sender. It is ignored because in a crowded inbox, your message looks like effort with no obvious reward, especially beside urgent notes from customers and executives. The real question is simple: what makes a stranger stop, read, and answer within those first few scanning seconds? The buyer does not read your email the way you wrote it, line by line with patience. They scan for relevance, risk, and time cost, usually in under 5 seconds between meetings. If your first lines feel generic, self-centered, or slow, your note gets mentally filed as later, which usually means never, or maybe after 147 unread messages. You are not competing only with other sellers chasing the same account or budget. You are competing with urgent customer issues, internal meetings, budget pressure, and dozens of tiny decisions that feel more immediate at 9:12 a.m. That means your email wins only when its value is instantly clearer than its friction, even against ordinary operational noise. No reply is still a response, even when it feels ambiguous or frustrating. It often means your message creates more questions than interest, more work than curiosity, or more claims than trust. In practice, silence usually signals friction, not mystery, and certainly not hidden enthusiasm. If your outbound is ignored, the cost is bigger than one missed meeting or one quiet week. You lose pipeline efficiency, confidence, and signal across the team. Reps start changing offers too early when the real problem is the message, not the market, ICP, or pricing strategy itself. Strong cold email performance usually comes from a few boring things done well: relevance, brevity, specificity, and a low-pressure ask. Fancy wording rarely rescues a weak premise, just like a better subject line cannot save irrelevant content. Buyers reward clarity before creativity almost every single time. Many sellers think the buyer owes them a full read once the email opens. In reality, you earn each second, one micro-commitment at a time. Your subject line earns the open, your first sentence earns the next line, and your proof earns the reply or at least a serious skim. Buyers use pattern recognition, a fast mental shortcut that guesses whether a message is worth time. Phrases like "just checking in," "hope you are well," and "wanted to reach out" often trigger the wrong pattern immediately, because they resemble thousands of low-value emails seen before. Familiar wording can quietly kill curiosity. An email can sound polished and still fail, which surprises a lot of smart teams. Useful means the buyer quickly sees a specific problem, a believable result, and an easy next step. Professional without useful just sounds like another template, maybe written carefully, but still disconnected from actual stakes. Personalization is not adding a compliment about a podcast episode or a funding round. That often feels like decoration, the email equivalent of small talk before a pitch. Real personalization links a visible business signal to a problem your offer can actually improve, with logic the buyer can verify in seconds. A buyer rarely asks whether your email is impressive, polished, or obviously well-researched. They ask whether it is relevant enough to deserve a reply right now, before their next call starts. That internal standard is brutal, but it is also useful guidance. So what does a strong email actually do in the first 10 seconds, maybe even the first 5? It reduces uncertainty fast. It tells the buyer why you picked them, what changed, and why the conversation might be worth having now instead of next quarter, when timing matters less. The biggest drop happens at the opening, not the close or the CTA. If your first sentence is about you, your company, or your excitement, the buyer has to do translation work. Translation work is where attention disappears, because busy people rarely volunteer to decode relevance on your behalf. A trigger is a recent, observable signal that makes your message feel timely rather than random. It could be hiring, expansion, a pricing shift, new leadership, or a visible process change, like opening 5 new territories. Timing without a trigger feels random, and randomness rarely earns replies from skeptical buyers. Good triggers usually share 3 traits, and weak ones usually miss at least one. They are visible, recent, and connected to pain. If a signal cannot logically point to a problem you solve, it belongs in research notes, not an email, even if it sounds interesting on paper. After the trigger, describe the likely friction in plain language the buyer already uses internally. Not a dramatic pain point, just a credible operational drag, like delayed handoffs or manual reporting across 6 regions. Buyers trust messages that feel observant, not exaggerated, and certainly not theatrically urgent. Compare these 2 lines. We help companies improve efficiency. Or, teams in your stage often lose hours each week routing demo requests manually across regions. The second line wins because the buyer can picture it, test it against reality, and either agree or disagree immediately. Next comes proof. But proof is not a list of logos or a parade of brand names. Good proof sounds like this: a similar team reduced response lag, increased conversion, or cut manual work after fixing the same bottleneck. Concrete beats famous, especially when the numbers sound measured rather than magical. You do not need 5 metrics or a mini dashboard inside the email. One believable number often works better. A single measured result feels digestible, while a stack of claims can feel rehearsed or selective. For example, cut response lag 27% lands cleaner than 3 vague percentages. Then ask for less. Not a 30-minute demo. Not a platform walkthrough. Ask whether the problem is even relevant, or whether it is worth sharing a short perspective in 2 paragraphs. Small asks lower resistance, because the buyer can respond without committing their calendar, team, or reputation. A meeting request forces calendar decisions immediately, which raises friction before trust exists. A light question invites judgment first. Buyers answer faster when the decision is easy, reversible, and low risk. Your first goal is not a meeting. It is motion, even if that motion is a simple yes, no, or forward. Another reason emails get ignored is perceived effort, not just actual reading time. Even if your note takes 30 seconds to read, a long block of text feels expensive. Short paragraphs and clean structure reduce that psychological price, the same way a clear menu feels easier than a dense contract. If the buyer cannot summarize your message in 1 sentence after a quick skim, the email is too muddy. Strong messaging survives compression, even when read on a phone between calls. Weak messaging needs explanation, and explanation is what they skip, because inboxes reward clarity and punish complexity first. The fastest outbound improvement usually comes when reps stop trying to sound smart and start trying to sound unmistakably relevant. That shift feels less impressive at first, but it consistently produces more replies than polished cleverness ever does. But there is a twist. Some ignored emails are actually relevant and still fail, which confuses teams who did solid research. Why? Because relevance alone does not create trust. The buyer must also believe you understand the problem at the right altitude, with judgment instead of just information. Too high level and you sound generic, like every consultant who says efficiency matters. Too detailed and you sound presumptuous, as if you diagnosed their funnel from LinkedIn alone. The right altitude names the likely friction without pretending you already audited the entire business from the outside or know every exception. This is why many personalized emails miss, despite obvious effort and careful research. They prove research, but not judgment. The buyer sees that you studied them, yet still cannot tell whether your perspective is useful or just cleverly assembled. Effort is visible, useful interpretation is what actually earns trust. So what should the first 10 seconds do? Show signal, frame likely friction, and offer 1 piece of proof. That sequence answers the buyer's silent questions: why me, why now, and why trust you? Miss even one of those, and attention usually starts to leak away. And what creates trust at the right altitude? Not praise, not jargon, not feature depth, and not inflated certainty. Trust comes from accurate problem framing and restrained confidence. You sound credible when you leave room to be corrected, because that signals judgment instead of performance. First, rewrite your opening around buyer context, not your company introduction or origin story. Start with a signal and a likely consequence. If the first line can be sent to anyone, it is already too weak. Generic openers fail because they make the buyer do the relevance math. Second, use proof that feels transferable, not merely impressive in a pitch deck. The buyer should think, this might apply here, not, this sounds like a polished case study from another universe. Similarity matters more than prestige, especially when the environment, team size, or bottleneck feels comparable. Third, shrink the ask until replying feels easy, almost easier than ignoring you. You can always expand later in the thread or on a call. The cold email's job is not to close. It is to open a clean door, then let momentum do the heavier work afterward. Use this formula: trigger, likely friction, 1 proof point, low pressure question. It is simple because simplicity travels better through busy inboxes and across mobile screens. The easier your logic is to scan, the easier it is to answer, remember, and forward to another stakeholder. If your cold email gets ignored, do not assume the market is dead or buyers are impossible. First, assume the message asks for too much clarity from the reader, maybe in the opening, proof, or ask. Fix that, and the inbox starts feeling very different, often within a few send cycles. Write for the buyer's filter, not your own, and keep it sharp. That's the Sales Script Studio.